Hi, this is Lamar, and you're listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. A third space is a term that refers to a safe space for people to come together for respectful dialogue in a spirit of listening, sharing, and learning. In this podcast, we explore what it means to have third space conversations, and we try to model them. If you like what you hear in this podcast, please be sure to subscribe, share it, and of course, like it. The more people join us, the quicker we get to third space as a society. Now let's get to third space today.
Hey there, Lamar. How's it going today?
It's going great, Tom. How's it going with you?
Oh, not bad. Not bad at all. I mean, it was blue skies and beautiful today, but it was supposed to get up to like high 70s. I think it got up to maybe the high 50s. I'm not sure.
Well, good. I'm glad you had blue skies. We've had rain all day. It started in the middle of the night, and it's been going all day. But we could use the rain here. We are in parts of our state are in drought conditions, so we'll take the rain.
Yeah. Well, actually, we've had a lot of rain recently, but they tell us we're still in drought conditions.
Okay.
So I guess that the rain is still very, very welcome, and we'll take it. So there.
Well, speaking of drought, I did hear that Lake Powell is rising. It's on the rise. Lake Powell
in California,
right?
No.
Lake Powell, and what's the other lake that's in that Colorado River?
Oh yeah. So they're getting some water again.
But they're getting some water, and they're starting to rise. I mean, they still have a long way to go to get back to what normal has been, but it's rising significant enough. So that's good to see.
That is. Well, so as much as people probably really enjoy just having you and I talk, we actually have a guest today.
Yes, we do.
Pretty cool. So this is a guest that you made contact with through another one of our other guests. Why don't you kind of fill in our listeners to how this has happened and who our guest is here?
Yeah, so about a year ago, we had an interview with now Senator Stephen Owens here from Kansas. At that point, he was representative, and he did win the Senate seat this last election. And I have an opportunity on occasion just to sit down and have coffee with Stephen every once in a while. And I was just chatting with him about the possibility of having another politician on, and particularly someone who may be from kind of the other side of the aisle. And Stephen said, "Hey,"
because Steve's a Republican, right?
Stephen is a Republican, right. And in fact, the two politicians we had on were Republicans from Kansas.
Yes. Yeah.
Carolyn McGinn and Stephen. And Stephen said, well, I have someone that I serve on a committee with, and I'd be happy to connect you. So he did. He connected me with State Senator Ethan Corson. Hmm. Ethan Corson is from the Johnson County area in the Kansas City, Kansas area. And I've never met Ethan Corson, Senator Corson, but I've made the connection. And between you, me, and Senator Corson, we arranged for an interview for today. So I'm pretty excited to find out a little bit more about his experience.
It's. I can only imagine it's got to be a really interesting experience because, as we've talked a couple of times, Kansas is an interesting state in that the Republicans have a supermajority in both the House and the Senate, even though there is a Democratic governor.
Right.
And so here he is. And I think you were saying that he's like one of 9 Democratic senators.
One of 9. That's right.
And how many total are in the Senate?
There are 40 senators. And 9 of those are Democrats, and he is one of those.
Oh my, that's got to be interesting.
So I think it will be interesting to get a sense of his experience, and and not only is he one of 9 senators, but he's also the caucus chair, which puts him on the Senate Leadership Committee. with certain responsibilities that we will find out about. So I'm kind of curious about how that works for him.
Yeah. Well, I'm really looking forward to meeting Ethan and this conversation tonight. And actually, we have him stuffed away in the green room right now.
Yeah, and I did have the basket delivered a little bit earlier. Hopefully, he's gone through part of it. Yeah,
excellent. That very, very good. So
it did not come from China, just so you know.
Did not. Oh, okay. So there's no tariffs attached.
There's no tariff attached to this.
Excellent. I'm really, really glad to hear that.
With the budget that we have, we cannot afford to pay a tariff.
We can't. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So, well, Lamar, shall we open that creaky door and let him in?
Well, let's let him in.
All right. Okay, that green door has opened, Lamar, and we want to welcome Ethan Corson.
Absolutely. Welcome, Ethan.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you both.
We should probably ask, do we need to call you Senator?
No, I say Ethan is good. I say, what I tell people is I've been called about everything and I answer to most things, but Ethan is perfect.
Okay. All right. Very, very good. Very good.
How did you like the fruit?
Hey, it was great. Okay? Pineapple, the mango, can't beat it.
That's right. We had it flown in from the tropics just for you.
Yeah.
But not China.
Not China.
Well, I was going to say, wait till you see. I don't know. You may have to stop doing these baskets with what they might cost. Those fruit baskets. You could go broke doing some of these fruit baskets. You better be careful.
Yeah,
with
all the money we bring in. Yeah.
You didn't try to peel the mango by hand, did you?
Very good.
No.
Good, well, because that's a real challenging thing to do. I understand. So they're very slippery once you get the peel off. So
I just bit straight into it. Is that not what you're supposed to do?
That works.
I have no idea. I think that sounds really good to me. So yeah, but we are really glad that you're here and that you survived the green room. We try to make it as comfortable as possible. So, Ethan, we're just getting acquainted with you. And we explained in the opening how we actually found you through your colleague Stephen Owens, Senator Stephen Owens, and but what would you like us and our listening audience to know about you? What are the most important things that we should know about you?
Well, I would say first, I'm really sort of inspired by the topic of your show and kind of what you're trying to do here. So I was frankly very honored when my friend Stephen asked me to do this. I really valued the friendship and the relationship that I have with Senator Owens. And I told him, I said, I'm really honored that you kind of when he described to me what the show was about and the gist of it, I said, I'm really frankly honored that you think of me in that vein as somebody who would make a good guest on that show. I've really enjoyed working with Senator Owens, and I think that we've actually done some really good work together on numerous different things. And so again, was just really felt lucky that I was somebody that he thought of in the vein that would be appropriate for your show. So a little bit about me. I was elected to the Kansas Senate in 2020, took office in 2021. I represent a pretty large district on the Kansas side of the KC metro area. So when you think of us, we're kind of suburban Kansas City is how I would describe our district. I'm an attorney by training, and I actually practice law when we're not in the legislative session. I work at a small law firm here in Johnson County, which is the county that is on the Kansas side of the KC Metro. I'm married, got a wife, and two great young boys. I've got a 5-year-old boy named Isaac, and I've got an 18-month-old boy named Aiden, and they are both tremendous, bring me tremendous joy. And that's the most important thing I do, is being a husband and father to them. And I am a big baseball junkie. I actually played baseball at Garden City Community College, and then transferred and played baseball at Washington University in St. Louis. So was a college baseball player and still a big fan. And now one of my great joys is I'm doing T-ball with my 5-year-old son. So it's kind of coming full circle.
Great. Great. And I'm sure that you're taking your family on occasion to watch the Royals play just down the road.
Yeah. So we're actually going to the game on Mother's Day. Yeah.
Wow.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Now was this your spouse's idea of a great Mother's Day present, or was it your kid's idea?
I would say a little more than ours. We're looking, so with our 5-year-old, night games are hard because it gets so close to bedtime. So we are looking for day games, and so there are just kind of precious few day games that are on the calendar because that's kind of his sweet spot as far as when he's when I would say when he's able to enjoy it most, but if he's not enjoying it, nobody's enjoying it. So it's when we're all able to enjoy the game the most.
Well, so I am known for a few non sequiturs here and there, but have you heard of banana ball?
Is this the Savannah Bananas, or is this something different?
Savannah Bananas. Yes, they are packing out major league stadiums around the country. Touring, so they're kind of like. I mean,
would it be fair to kind of call them almost like the Harlem Globetrotters of baseball? Is that sort of fair? Okay.
Yes.
So I've seen them on social media and other things. I've never watched like a full game or anything, but I've seen clips on social media. It reminds me. My mom used to take me when I was a kid to go watch the Harlem Globetrotters.
Yeah. Yeah. Which
I thought was great. So when I see the clips, I'm sort of like, this is a Harlem Globetrotters, but for baseball.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. They're going to be both in Baltimore, which is 50 miles from us to the east, and in DC, which is 50 miles to the south of us. And you can't get tickets.
Wow.
And the tickets that you can get, you can't afford.
So now who do they play? That part I've never figured out.
Okay. They play the Party Animals, which is owned by the same guy.
Okay.
60 Minutes did a really great show about them, by the way.
So the Party Animals are like the Washington Generals then?
Who are the Washington Generals?
Well, the Washington Generals are the team that the Harlem Globetrotters play.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, right. So they have the Party Animals, which are actually owned by the same couple that own the Savannah Bananas. And so they travel and they play banana ball, and it looks like just so much fun. So
I got to check it out and see if they'll be in the Midwest sometime. I would love to go to a game. I would love to check that out, and I'm sure our oldest son would enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so there you go. That's my first non sequitur of the of our time here together. So,
well, I can talk baseball all day, so you feel free.
Well, I might interject and say, well, let's give you a different direction here.
Yeah, forget politics. Let's just talk about baseball.
Well, hey, I do have a question more related to what you do, and that is, I understand that you are in this super minority in the Senate.
Yes.
And in Kansas, in fact, the both houses of the legislature, parts of the legislature, are super minorities, dominated by the Republican Party. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the Republicans have more than 2/3 in both the House and the Senate. So in the Senate, for example, in Kansas, we have a 40-person Senate, and we've got 31 Republicans and 9 Democrats.
Yes. We were doing a little bit of our homework on that, and we go, that's got to be interesting. So I'm sure we'll be talking with you about that. So.
A little bit more about your background. One of the things I found really interesting, Ethan, was that you were practicing in D.C. for a while, early on in your career.
And working for the government, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I was both in private practice for about 7 years in Washington, D.C. I was at a large international law firm in private practice. And then in 2015, I joined the U.S. Department of Commerce, and I worked there actually in 2 different non-legal roles. I first worked directly for the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. And then I became the chief of staff for one of the larger bureaus at the U.S. Department of Commerce, the International Trade Administration. So I worked there as chief of staff to the undersecretary. And both of those were tremendously interesting experiences. Really enjoyed that. Actually, one of the more interesting professional experiences I've had a chance to have.
I would imagine, and I would think that what's going on now with all the the trade issues and the tariffs, et cetera, would have to be smack dab in the middle of what you had been looking at back in those
that
days.
was my professional world for a number of years. Was trade, international trade, and so it has been probably a separate conversation, but it's been interesting just to see the change in both political parties, I would say, about attitudes toward trade. There was a time when both parties were very pro-free trade, and now I think there are, to different extents in different parties, a much more protectionist view when it comes to the value of international trade, which for somebody like me who generally supports free trade, I think that's been somewhat disappointing to see that turn, because I do think one of the things I learned at the U.S. Department of Commerce is that 95% of the world's consumers are outside the U.S. So if you're a business, if you really want to grow, you really need to have access to those foreign markets. And so I think that this protectionism can have a real downside when it comes to really stifling economic growth.
Well, speaking of learning things, I'm just wondering how is your experience at the federal level different from working at the state level now? I mean, how would you compare and contrast those?
Yeah, so I guess I would start with sort of the Schoolhouse Rocks version, which is when I was at the U.S. Department of Commerce, I was in the executive branch. So we were really focused on carrying out the law. We had various initiatives that we were statutorily empowered and required to do, and we were working on executing that mission off of our strategic plan. And we were really focused on the execution of all these various programs. The legislative branch, by contrast, so now what I'm doing in Kansas, we're actually trying to make the law. And so I think it's very different, where on one hand, you're trying to just sort of day to day run the operations and execute at a really high level to the best of your ability these various programs and these various initiatives, whereas at the state level, we're focused on, well, what should the law be? It's a little bit more of a blank slate, whereas at the Department of Commerce, we had a strategic plan that we were focused on executing. I would also say that my experience, at least, was in the executive branch, folks are much more aligned on what the mission is. There's sort of a clear mission that whether you're at the U.S. Department of Commerce or the U.S. Department of State or another executive branch, it's sort of clear what your bailiwick is and what that mission is. And most people who decide to join that are roughly aligned with what that mission is, or else they probably would not have sought that line of work out in the first place. Whereas in the legislature, we are kind of trying to do this thing where we're all aligned in the sense of we all want what's in the best interest of Kansas. The problem is, in the Senate, for example, we have 40 different versions of what is the best interest of Kansas. And so it's a much more diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, and much more compromise involved in being in a legislature versus being in, at least from my experience, in an executive function.
Well, your experience seems to have been a little bit of what has maybe led to you getting into some of the committees that you're in currently. Can you talk a little bit about, because you're on what, is it 4 committees?
I'm on 4 permanent committees, and so I'm on the Senate Judiciary Committee. I'm the only member of my party that's a licensed attorney, so I was kind of an obvious fit for the Senate Judiciary Committee. So I get the privilege of serving as the ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I'm also on the Senate Transportation Committee. That makes a lot of sense because Kansas as a state, and Kansas City area specifically, is really kind of a transportation hub. We are where a lot of, you think about the highways and byways of really nationwide commerce, a lot of that runs through Kansas. So that's always a real central issue. I really wanted to be on that committee because it makes sense for somebody who represents my district to really make sure that we have a voice when it comes to those issues, because we transport so much of the nation's goods along either our railways or our interstate or things of that nature. I'm also a member of was really excited this session. I was able to join the Senate Commerce Committee. So given my background at the U.S. Department of Commerce, it made a lot of sense, and I had a lot of interest in those issues. And then I'm also privileged to serve as the ranking member of the Senate Tax Committee, which I've been a member of since 2021. And taxes, I think, in any state are a big issue, and so value the opportunity to have a large role in what's going on from a tax policy perspective for our state.
I mean, this is fascinating. The more that Tom and I kind of dig ourselves, to be honest with you, we are learning so much just meeting you and others that we've talked with. The kind of roles that you play and the roles that you have. You made a good comment where you said that there's 40 senators and there's 40 different perspectives. That has to take a lot of communication time, a lot of sitting down and kind of working through ideas and coming to agreements or finding out where we don't agree. So the skill sets really needed for those kinds of roles. Communication and listening is a huge piece of that. I have to believe.
I think that's right. I think that one of the things that I always try to, and I do this imperfectly, but I'm always trying to have the attitude of, let me try to genuinely understand what the other person is saying. What is it that my colleague is saying? And not just waiting for my turn to talk. And I've got this lawyer brain that actually I think I need to turn off. I think I do my best when I turn it off, because there's this lawyer part of my brain that I'm like always thinking of what is the counterpoint to what this person is saying, or what is my rebuttal to what this person is saying. And I whenever I catch myself in getting into that mode, I try to just say, let me just step back and let me genuinely listen to what it is that this person is saying, and not think immediately to what is my argument on the other side or what is the counter. Let me just really sit back and really let my mind open, and let me just try to better understand, where is this person coming from? What led them to that view? Maybe is there an area where we could compromise, and maybe we could each achieve something that is a mutual goal of ours. It might not be 100% of what either of us would like, but maybe if I listen hard enough, I could. They might say something that could maybe spark an area where we could work together. So I think a large part of being in the legislature is trying to just listen and truly listen, not just listening in the sense of I'm listening, but thinking of when's it my turn to talk next, but genuinely trying to listen to folks.
I find myself wondering, since you have since the Republicans have such a supermajority there in the Senate as well as in the House, and so many times, the only strategies that are really available to people are, as Lamar said, and you affirmed, this ability to really communicate and listen and to talk with one another. So, how then do you actually? Are you not only able to create dialogue when one party has a supermajority, but how do you actually accomplish anything or get something through that is really meaningful to you, but is not likely to pass?
Well, I've tried to earn the respect of my colleagues. I think that's a big thing, is you need to try to be somebody that they are open to listening to. And what I try to do is I try to really feel like I'm trying to add value to our conversations. I try to really focus on the substance and not just the pure politics of something. So I try to raise points really respectfully. And I try to say, hopefully my colleagues, what I would want them to say about me is I'm trying to offer a good faith, different view. I'm not just offering this because I'm a member of the opposite party, but I'm maybe trying to bring a particular experience that I have, or something I feel like I might have a little bit of expertise. I'm really trying to be value additive to this conversation. I'm not just trying to kind of throw sticks and be disruptive or try to get in the way, but I'm really trying to just make sure, hey, have we thought about this? Have we thought about this? And so that's a big thing. And then I think it's just listening for what are those subtle areas of agreement, and maybe something small. I've learned, certainly as a member of the minority party, to savor the small victories that you do get. But I do think that overall, there is a lot more that really unites the legislature than divides it. I think a lot of time gets spent on the things that can be divisive. I think a lot of stories get written about the things that are divisive. But if you actually did a study, you would see that the vast majority, and I don't have the actual number, but I would offer that, I would say, 80, maybe upwards of 90% of our bills are near unanimous, right? Even with the legislature. But a lot of the focus, of course, is on that 10, 15% where there is significant disagreement. But a lot of our bills are relatively uncontroversial and pass without a lot of controversy. So I would say that my tips are just try to be a good listener, try to add value, try to earn the respect of your colleagues, try to treat people with respect. And again, if you listen hard enough, often you can come up with kind of an area that you can agree on and compromise around.
I think that point about how often or how many of the decisions you all make are made, across the aisle together. It's good to hear, because as a constituent, that's not what I hear, right? If I get depends kind of where I get my information from. Tom and I have talked a lot about where we get our information, and trying to understand what motivates those outlets that give us information, and the kinds of things that you're suggesting, we don't hear a whole lot. In fact, what seems to make the clip or needs to make the article are those things that where there's a win-loss kind of a situation that's happened, which is unfortunate for us.
Yeah, I was a journalism and political science major in college.
Right.
There's that old saying that, if it bleeds, it leads, right? And so there is sort of I think a natural tendency to focus on areas of disagreement where there's controversy and things like that. And I actually think we have a really good Capitol Press Corps in Kansas that does do a good job of covering things. But certainly I think that there is much more compromise and much more working together than I think maybe the average person would see. And certainly, I would throw myself in this category. I think there's more of that than I might have thought before I was a member of the legislature. We do have good friendships across the aisle. And, one of the things that I've tried to do is, I've tried to never personalize disagreements. When I have argued vigorously on one side or the other of different issues, and I try to always keep those disagreements really focused on the substance of what the issue is. It is never personal with another colleague. I actually, going back to, we talked a little baseball when we got started, but I actually analogize it a lot to playing baseball. I mean, when you were playing the game, when we're having a debate on the Senate floor about one of those 10 or 15% of the bills that there are really passionate feelings about on both sides. And sometimes those debates aren't always Republican Democrats. Sometimes they are based off geography, and folks from different parts of the state have different perspectives. And so they're not always just a party debate, but we will have, very fulsome debates on a number of issues. And, in those debates, it's sort of like baseball. You want to win. You care passionately about the issue. You want to make your best arguments. You want to put your best foot forward and make what you think are the most compelling arguments. But ultimately, when the vote happens, my attitude has always been, it's over at that point. You need to shake hands. The game is over, and you need to get in line and shake hands with the other team. And you need to say good game. And hopefully you either won or you lost, and there will be another day. There will be another issue. But I try not to let those things carry past the debate. And I certainly try to never let them get to a point where it's personal, right? It's always just, we have a good faith disagreement about this particular issue. So let's talk about that. Ultimately, we'll vote on it. One side will prevail, one side won't. And then we'll shake hands and we'll move on to the next thing. And maybe, hopefully, we'll agree on that one.
It doesn't seem like politics is much like that these days. I mean, and I think you've alluded to this fact when you said that if it bleeds, it leads, right? So the press, and I don't want to knock the press per se, But regardless of the perspective of the press, whether it's on the right or on the left or in the middle, it seems like what we hear about are those controversies, those issues in which people are really kind of in opposition to one another. And I think that's part of what makes it really, really hard when you say, you wouldn't believe that, we can do these things collaboratively. We can have a bill that comes out that all of us are really pretty comfortable with. I hear that and I think, gosh, I'm not sure if I believe that anymore, especially at the federal level. And what that leads me to wonder is I'm not sure why anybody would want to go into politics at this time, given what is being represented to us, and sometimes just given what we see, when it's unedited and just there on C-SPAN for us to look at. And I want to be really clear. I'm not apolitical, and I have a lot of respect for people that are involved in politics, because we need good politicians on both sides of the aisle, and we really need solutions to come forth from that kind of collaborative effort. But it is discouraging at times, and I'm just wondering, what would be the advertisement you would cut for somebody to come in and become involved in politics? Is there such a thing?
Yeah, and I appreciate that question, Tom. That is it's a great question. And to be clear, I don't have rose-colored glasses, and so I don't want to give the audience the maybe false perception that it is all hunky-dory all the time. And we do have big disagreements. We do have moments of conflict. We do have sometimes, I think at least, momentary times when maybe a colleague will feel resentment towards another colleague. And we do have times where we're not always, like in anything, probably not always our best version of ourselves. And there are disappointments and there are frustrations with certainly with being in a super minority in a legislative body. And so I don't want to sugarcoat that or give your audience the sense that there are certain frustrations that come with that. But I do think that when we are at our best version, we can get a lot done for the people of Kansas. And I do think genuinely that the people who, at least in my experience, who do want to enter, at least I've never served as an elected position. I was in an appointed position in the federal government, but never served in an elected position in the federal government. But at least in the state government, I think I've seen most of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle are folks who I think got into it because they genuinely want to positively contribute to their community. And but the challenge is, everybody represents different constituents. And so certain constituents have different views than other constituents about what it means to positively contribute to our community. Certainly, not all of our constituents, even within our districts, agree on what would constitute most positively contributing to our community. So going back to what I touched on earlier, you got 40 people, 40 different versions of what the best possible Kansas looks like. And we're kind of this big, noisy way of kind of settling our differences through the legislative process.
Do you think that perhaps for yourself or for other folks that do you think the reasons that they came into politics, do those change over time, or do they stay pretty much the same?
I would say hopefully they don't. But I would say they can. I think most of my colleagues have avoided it, but I think there are instances where I think people can get caught up in what I would call kind of the game of politics. Who's up, who's down, who's settling this score, and just to be candid, I would also say, if this was just about making a difference, there are other ways that one can do that other than kind of publicly putting themselves out on a ballot in front of their community and their peers. And so there's naturally, I think, people who choose to run for public office, a certain amount of ego involved in that. And so I think that that's something that all of us need to just be cautious about, making sure that we are, containing our ego and trying to be the best version of ourselves and the version that best suits our constituents and our community, and really try to lead with kind of a servant heart. And again, though, I think most of my colleagues do that. I think there are probably instances where all of us could look back and say, I wish I had handled that a little differently, or maybe my emotions got the best of me during that particular debate because I was just really passionate about that issue. So I don't think we always do our best job of that, but I will say, I think for the most part, people are in it for the right reasons, and that reason generally is that they want to try to make a positive contribution to their state, to their city, to their community, and make Kansas the best it can possibly be.
And that may be the answer to the question I'm going to ask. But can you tell us a little bit about you? What has attracted you to get into politics and to stay into politics as you have? And I'm assuming it's some of those things. But can you tell us a little bit about your story? What's got you connected?
Yeah, well, I got really interested in politics in college. And just started going to college Democrats meetings and getting involved. And then I've sort of been at kind of every step that you would normally do. I interned for my local congressperson. I was a fellow on Capitol Hill for a senator. I worked as a volunteer and as a paid staffer on campaigns, and just kind of really felt passionate about the idea that in our society, this is how we kind of shape the society that we want to live in. We don't do it. We don't do it through war, through violence. We really try to do it through this political process. And I think that's one of the things that makes our country great as a democracy, is that every citizen has an opportunity to get involved. Everybody has a chance to bring forward their views, and that this is how we shape what our community looks like, what our state looks like, and ultimately what our country looks like. So I was really attracted to that as a way to kind of make my voice heard and advocate for people who I thought had shared values of mine. And then for me, when I became somebody who was thinking about running for office myself, it was really that I live in basically the same community now that I grew up in. And so it's an opportunity for me. My two boys will go to the same school district that I went to. And it's just a real honor and a real privilege to be able to be my community's voice in the Kansas Senate and to advocate for things that I think are really core to what has made our community so great, which is things like, public education and other things that I think are really core to what our community prioritizes. And so to, again, be able to be their voice and be their advocate is just a tremendous privilege. I mean, despite frustrations and other things, I do wake up every day feeling lucky to be able to do this work, and honored that really the people that raised me, the community that I grew up in, have now, I'm 42, so 42 years later, sent me to the state capitol to try to be their voice and hopefully make a positive difference.
Yeah, and they sent you twice, right? You just had an election a year ago, right?
Yeah, it was just reelected in 2024. Yeah, I was honored with that.
With a very strong affirmation through the votes for you to be back in the Senate again.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We worked really hard. We improved our margin significantly from 2020, and it meant a lot. We won. One big goal that I had was I represent 10 different cities within my Senate district, and I actually won all 10 of my cities. So that was a goal that I had.
You were just talking about the role of how our democracy works, right? And so one of the things, as you know, that Lamar and I have really focused on in this podcast is this idea of civil conversation or civil dialogue and the value of it. I really have kind of a two-part question. I'm going to throw them both out there, and I'll let you pick them up as you wish. Um, I'm wondering what role you see civil conversation or civil dialogue playing in democracy. And then the second part of that is there is some worry and concern across the country right now that our democracy is in trouble. And how do you see that? Are we in danger of losing our democracy?
So I think civil conversation is just an essential piece of democracy, and I think it's really vital. We live in a big, diverse society. We live in a big, diverse country. People have different lived experiences. They live in different parts of the country, or even, for example, within Kansas, they live within different parts of Kansas where they have a different experience. They have different professional experiences. They have different family upbringings and family situations. They have different educational paths. So it's only natural that we're not going to agree on everything. But I think the important point that I would make is that doesn't mean that we can't be good neighbors. That doesn't mean we can't be good friends. Doesn't mean we can't be good colleagues. And it's sort of, I guess, a little bit sad that you even have to say it, but I know that we probably all at least know somebody whose family has been had a changed dynamic because of politics. But it doesn't mean that you can't even love and appreciate family members that have, wildly diverse political opinions. And I do just worry about our ability to continue to have those conversations in a way that's respectful. I mean, I think that, one interesting statistic that I've seen is that it used to be maybe 50, 60 years ago that there were surveys that showed that people had a lot of apprehension about if your son or daughter married somebody of a different religion. 50, 60 years ago, that was a big concern for many parents at that time. Now what you see is that is much less of a concern. But what you see is people who would say that it would be a big concern if my son or daughter married somebody of a different political philosophy. And so I think that just speaks to how polarized we become as a society. And I think, again, our need to just try to be respectful of various viewpoints and make sure that we are just understanding that there are just certain issues that people are coming to in good faith and just ending up on different sides of. And it doesn't mean that one side is always wrong and one side is always right. It just means that people are sort of, I used to work for a guy who used to say, it's somebody picks up the stick from the other end and they just see it differently,
Mm-hmm. It sounds to me like maybe what you're saying here, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so please correct me if I have this wrong. It seems like you might be saying that the degree to which we are able to engage one another in civil conversation and civil dialogue is the degree to which we actually are going to be able to preserve our democracy.
I think it's an essential part of it. I wouldn't say it's the only thing, but I think it's an essential part of it to continue to be able to have conversations, whether it's at the community level, at the state level, at the national level, where we're talking about difficult issues, because those issues aren't going to go away. Whether we talk about them in a respectful way or not, the issues are still going to be the issues. It's just how we choose to talk about them. Yeah. And I also, and I think maybe this is me kind of as a father speaking, but I think it's what are we modeling for younger people who are looking at this? And one of the things I worry about, when I first got interested in politics, and apologize for the little bit of a segue here, but one of the things that when I first got interested in politics, I had a lot of really positive experiences with people who were interested in sort of furthering my interest in that and helping me along the way. And I just had for me, it was a very positive experience, which is probably why I stayed with it and continued to kind of maybe climb the ladder, for lack of a better term. So I worry about if you're a young person today and you're so I got interested in politics. I was around 20, 21 years old. I was in college. And so if you're a 20, 21-year-old today and you're just watching our politics, and you don't have any other frame of reference, like I have some historical perspective, I'm kind of dating myself, but I kind of remember a different time, But if you don't have any historical reference and you're just watching today's politics, I worry that people would say, I don't think I want to get involved in my community. That seems really mean and nasty and bitter. And I just think that there's other ways that I want to spend my time. I don't think politics is for me. I don't think I want to get engaged. And I think that would be a real shame, because we need people to be working to try to actively make their communities better. And so I do have this deep worry about what are young people seeing when they're seeing politics, and is that affecting their ability and their interest and motivation in maybe pursuing that as, if not a full-time career, at least something that they maybe just want to be actively engaged in as a citizen.
You've alluded to this, and you've talked about how civil conversation and good communication skills are so important for what you do. Can you give us an example, without naming names or making it very obvious? Can you give us an example of how maybe situations where you've actually had to use that skill set, and kind of what was the outcome?
That's a great question, Lamar. I appreciate it. So one of my favorite parts of politics is knocking on doors. And so when you're running for a state legislative office, a big part of any campaign is just going out there by yourself, for me, it's in the evenings and weekends, and you just take a little pamphlet that you can give to everybody, and you're just out knocking on doors in your community, in your district, and you're just talking to folks. You're just having genuine conversations. And so I had some conversations where people would say, you know what, I think I really disagree with you on this particular issue. And what I would say is I'm here to listen. I respect that viewpoint. I want you to know that as your senator, I care enough to be here. I'm literally at your doorstep, right? I mean, you can't get any more kind of direct democracy than that. I am knocking on your doorbell. I am here. I'm on your front porch. I'm your state senator. You can talk to me about whatever issue you have on your mind. I'm here. I'm listening, and I respect your viewpoint. We may end up just disagreeing. Obviously, I won with a big enough margin that frankly, I didn't have to have that too often, or else that'd be problematic. Right. But I did have people who would just say, "Hey, I followed how you voted on this particular issue. I really strongly disagree with it." And we would talk about the issue. I would listen and ask kind of how I could learn more about the point of view that they were coming from. I would share with them kind of how I was looking at the issue and the point of view that I was coming from. And almost every time we ended up in a really respectful place. I wouldn't say that they necessarily convinced me. I wouldn't say that I convinced them. But I had a joke that I would say, here's the deal. So I would say, is my opponent come to your door yet and personally knocked on your door yet? And this is Kansas. This is June, July, August, September. It's about 95 degrees or more. And they would say no. But most often they would say no, he hasn't. I'd say, well, here's the thing. So if my opponent comes to your door and it's above 95 degrees and they knock on your door, I think you should vote for them. But if they don't, I'm expecting your vote. And they would kind of nod, and they'd look at my sweat drenched shirt and see me kind of sweating through my polo. And they would say, okay, you know what? That's fair. Because I think people had a sense that, you know what, I may not agree with this person 100% of the time. And I've never met a politician that I agree with 100% of the time. But this person is really out there hustling. And if they're willing to work this hard that they're spending their Saturday when it's 98 degrees and humid away from their family, going through a neighborhood, knocking on every door, talking to people, they're probably going to work pretty hard for me if they get elected. And so even if there's a couple issues that I don't agree with them on, I admire that hustle. And that's probably somebody who's going to really be a strong advocate for our community, because it seems like they really want to do this.
That I admire I admire you being able to do that, or anyone being able to do it. That just gives me my anxiety goes up when I think about, a cold call like that. But I'm impressed that that's something that you're able to do. I think once I'm in a conversation, I'm fine, but it's kind of that anticipation of, I don't know what's behind the door. So I'm impressed with that. Yeah.
Mhm.
So one of the things that Tom and I have talked about, probably more recently, has been sometimes you have to take winning off the table in a civil conversation. It's not necessarily about me changing your mind, and I'm going to change your mind, but it's about me understanding why you believe or think what you think or believe what you believe, and let me give you an opportunity why I believe what I believe. The change can happen maybe later if there is change, but having the conversation isn't always about winning the conversation. And I think that's one of the differences we believe that a civil conversation is about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that rings true to me. I think the more that you can have the conversation where you're genuinely saying, one of the things I love about serving the legislature is you get to learn about things that are going on all across the state in a way that I would never get to learn about if I were just in my little part of the state, kind of doing my job and living my day-to-day life. So we get to be involved in issues and work with colleagues, again, 40 people from all corners of the state. And so I enjoy that because I get to listen to folks, and so oftentimes they'll say something like, I had a town hall when I was back in my district, and here's what people really wanted to talk about. And I'll think, that's really interesting because I had a town hall. My constituents wanted to talk about completely different things. But that helps me because now I understand better why you're focused on some of these issues. And maybe you better appreciate why I'm focused on some of the issues I'm focused on. But I think having that open dialogue, people might think that being a lawyer is a tremendous advantage in serving in the legislature. But as I mentioned, I think some of it you need to kind of turn off because you need to stop always thinking about what is my rebuttal, what is my counterpoint, how am I going to get in, my argument, right? It's almost like you're arguing before a judge or you're taking a deposition, but it's like, don't worry about your rebuttal, don't worry about your counterpoint. Just sit back and really have this conversation with this person and try to understand, that's, your community. It sounds like your community is really different than my community. It sounds like, you have different needs than maybe my community has. It sounds like people have expressed to you maybe different priorities than some of my community have. That's really interesting. But also, it sounds like kind of actually, when we break it down, we actually do want a lot of the same things. So maybe there's some mutual areas of agreement here because it sounds like everybody wants their kids to have a brighter future. Everybody wants their kids to go to a good school. Everybody wants to live in a safe community. Everybody wants to have a job that allows them to save for a retirement that where they can have a dignified retirement. Mm-hmm. And so it's like I'm both hearing some interesting differences, but I'm also hearing a lot of things that we could probably work on together because there are some just core values that I think are core to Kansas that regardless of where you go, whether you're in Heston or whether you're in Fairway, Kansas, people in those communities want their kids to have a brighter future.
Right.
Right. And so we can work on that and try to have a state where every kid can have a brighter future. So I leave most of those conversations more optimistic than when I started, if you're able to genuinely just let yourself listen.
Another way to kind of frame some of what you're saying is you're also building relationships, not only with your constituents, but also with your colleagues, whether you are on the same side of the aisle or not. Because if you don't have the relationships, you're not able to really move forward in what your tasks are.
So probably one of the things that has best served me of anything that I've done in the legislature, that one of the things that has enabled me to have, I think, probably the best conversations and relationships has nothing to do really with politics, but it's that I grew up here in Johnson County, which, as I described, is kind of a suburban part of the Kansas City metro area. But I was chasing my baseball dream. And I went and after high school, I went and I played community college baseball in Southwest Kansas at Garden City Community College. And so I saw a completely different part of the state. I went from an urban suburban part of the state to a much more rural part of the state. I was about 6.5 hours away from home for the first time, in a community that had a lot of differences from what I was used to. And so learning about both the differences, but also seeing the commonalities of that community, has, I think, helped me kind of establish relationships with my colleagues. Cause I say, no, I'm not just this senator from Johnson County. I know what it's like to play baseball in Barton County, and I remember when we used to go to El Dorado to play Butler and Hutchinson and Seward, and so getting all around the state really opened my eyes to just the diversity of our state, the differences, but again also a lot of similarities of what I would call kind of core Kansas values: faith, community, wanting your children to do better than you have, that really, I think, have the ability to bring people together.
I really appreciate a few minutes ago you were talking about, I think for the second time actually, about kind of turning off the inner lawyer, and backing away from the temptation to be preparing a rebuttal. Because so many times when we get into contentious conversations with people, that's exactly what is happening. We are standing there acting like we're listening, but we're actually formulating our next move as soon as we have a chance to do that. And so obviously from experience, you've had to learn how to do that. And I just wanted to say that I think that some of the things you've shared the last few minutes here have been just really wonderful tips, if you will, or suggestions, if you will, as to how you are able to kind of take that step back and everything from, going to be listening, going to be focused on the other person, going to build the relationship. And I love this piece about, go and understand, learn what you can about life in the other person's shoes, because that's effectively what you did when you were playing baseball in Garden City. Is that as you were traveling around the state and you're playing in other venues, you were learning about your state. You were learning about people in the other parts of your state. And so many times, whether it's Kansas or where it's Iowa, where both Lamar and I grew up, we had misconceptions about what it was like to live in another part of the state. In the part of the state we lived in, Des Moines was the big city, right? And so it's like, oh my gosh, Des Moines, what must it be like to live in Des Moines? What must it be like to go to school in Des Moines? That was your imagination could just run wild, about what that was like. So I hope people are picking that up as they're listening, that you're actually dropping these wonderful little tidbits along the way about how you continue to engage in civil conversation with people, even when you're not on the same page in some regards. So I just wanted to note that and say how much I appreciate that.
Well, I really enjoy it. I again hope I enjoy it, and I think that the project that this podcast is trying to do is really important because it's much needed. I'm honored to be a part of it, and I think it's great that you have a passion for this at a time when it's really needed in our society.
I appreciate that very much, and it's something that we both are passionate about. We kind of come to the spot here where we kind of turn the tables a little bit. And we ask you what questions you might have of Tom and I. It's always fascinating to hear what people might be thinking about.
Yeah, well, I think this is such a unique topic to build a podcast around. We talked about it a little bit before we started recording, but just kind of talk about kind of where your passion for this comes from and what the kind of kernel of the idea that led to this becoming a podcast.
There you go. Well, Lamar, you want to take a swing since we're using baseball metaphors? Do you want to take a swing at that one?
I'll take a crack at it. How's that? Yeah. So both Tom and I's career it's kind of been parallel over time. We both have been in the mental health world or counseling world for a lot of years. By the way, I did a lot of work in the court system as a mental health professional. And did a lot of work with mediation, did a lot of work with families in crisis needing work to process through those crises. And one of the things that was so important to me was that people learned to listen to each other. Because if you didn't understand where the person you're working with or trying to interact with is coming from, there was likely no way to resolve whatever conflict or whatever issues we were trying to resolve. And that can be played out in so many different types of scenarios. I was in education for a while and then manufacturing, and all of those things still are true. For us to be able to resolve kind of the conflicts or come together to move forward with projects or with planning, people have to be able to figure out how to get together on the same page, and that's a challenge. It's a challenge that I think you used the word polarization early on in this podcast, and I see more of that happening, which in my book means that we have we take less opportunity to talk about or to talk together. We really avoid conversation about difficult things. Tom and I were and our spouses started a kind of a Skype or a Zoom coffee back during COVID time. So every Saturday morning we would have coffee together over Zoom. Well, as the issues began to arise around the COVID period, all of those things were happening and things were being said and beliefs and theories, conspiracies and poor information and good information getting mixed together. We just became really concerned that people were really beginning to polarize over issues that may or may not be accurate, may not be factual, and they may not be helpful, and even families being torn apart by where one person was at versus where the other was at. And so that was kind of what led our conversations on Saturday mornings over coffee to say, yeah, maybe we could do a podcast, not knowing what that meant, but maybe we could do a podcast and talk about these kinds of things, the things that both Tom and I have learned in our careers. Could we apply them?
Yeah. Well, I think that's important because, I think that having civil conversations, people shouldn't take away that it doesn't mean you can't have strong views. Mm-hmm. It just means that the way that you express those views is respectful and you are accepting that other people also have strong views that are different than yours. So I think there can be kind of a misimpression that civil conversation means we all have very moderate views and we're all meeting in the middle. But I think, for example, going back to my friend Senator Owens, we have actually a lot of issues that we do agree with each other on, but we certainly have some issues that we both have pretty divergent views on. But we just accept that those are different views, and we have civil dialogue around those views, and we still cherish the friendship and the relationship.
Sure.
I would add one little thing as I was listening to Lamar talk about that. I think that our careers have influenced us in many ways. And there was also another time in our life when both Lamar and I were in a profession in which our job was to persuade people.
Oh.
And I think, I don't want to speak fully for him, but he can contradict me here if he likes. But I think that there came a point for both of us when we felt like there was something not fully genuine about that, and that we were seen in a very authoritative way, and or people really accepted us as having authority that I'm not sure that we really did have, or knowledge that we really did have, and that over the years and over the time that we spent in that career, we felt more and more like we were just being disingenuous. I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth there, Lamar.
No, you're fine. You're right.
Yeah. And so
it was definitely a time where we learned a lot, but boy, the more we learned and experienced, the more we realized this was not okay.
Yeah, and then as we're facing the pandemic, and we began to hear people speaking to one another with that same almost voice of authority, and just hitting one another back and forth. I mean, verbally hitting one another, well, sometimes physically. We were reminded of that, and how not only was that disingenuous for us, but it also was highly problematic in terms of how people were communicating today as well.
Yeah. Well, I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who's a high school teacher at one of our area high schools. He's probably my best friend. We've been friends since kindergarten. We were locker partners. He was the quarterback on the football team. I was the pitcher on the baseball team. So we've just been good friends, and he's a teacher now at our local high school, and at the time was also a coach. And during the COVID period, I mean, he said, we spend so much time with young people trying to talk to them about how to resolve differences, how to have the kind of conversations that we're talking about, how to agree without being disagreeable, how to resolve conflict. And we are really invested in that practice at a classroom level. But then you go to our school board meeting and you have adults who are behaving in a way that is completely antithetical to everything we're trying to teach these students. And so, go back to, I touched on it earlier, but, we need to maybe model this behavior because I think young people are paying attention to what they see as acceptable behavior. And so I still remember that, just that comment about, some school board meetings that had gotten, I think, rather contentious, where we had adults behaving in a way that if our children were behaving that way, we would want to reprimand those children. And so it's a good lesson for all of us to try to model that behavior that we want to see.
Yeah.
And then I think on the lighter side, I think I know Tom and I both said, well, let's do five podcasts, then we'll be done. Well, yeah, we're in year 3 of putting out podcasts every couple of weeks, and so we are both amazed at kind of the reception, but also what the need is. And so our goal is not only to talk about kind of the nuts and bolts of having civil conversation, but then also, like in an interview today, talking about how do you put it into place? What are the examples that we have around us? How are people finding opportunities to have civil dialogue when, in many other cases, it's absent? So your kind of sharing with us are the kinds of things that we're looking for as well. So we very much appreciate what you've had to say today.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a blast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate the time that you took to do this, and people don't usually know when we record these. This is being recorded at 2 a.m. No, just kidding.
2 a.m. that's when our 18-month-old is usually up. So you might actually catch me awake there changing a diaper.
That could be, but probably not in the best humor for sitting down for a podcast at that point in time. But actually, this is a nighttime recording, which is a bit unusual for us. But it's been really good, and thank you for taking your time out away from your family tonight, or knocking on doors, or whatever else you do as a legislator. We really appreciate you being here with us tonight, Ethan. Thank you so very
much. Yep.
Well, I'm glad we were introduced. Again, I think this is an important mission that you have, and I was really wanted to prioritize being a part of it. So thank you.
Great.
Well, make sure you tell Stephen hello for us.
I will. Yes. Absolutely. I will. I'm hoping to see him later this summer, and I will.
Well, that was a lot of fun, Lamar.
I enjoyed our time with Ethan. He was shared a lot of good information for us, as well as you get a sense of what kind of a senator, what kind of person he is to work with.
Yeah. So I'm just curious. Is there any one thing that you take away from that conversation that you would want our folks that are listening in to really hang on to?
Yeah, actually, a couple of things that are tied together. I was pleased to hear from his perspective that the work in the states is there's a lot of working across the aisle that we don't really know about because they're not it's not necessarily covered by the press. And he was saying it's in the high percentages of things that are decided are bipartisan. So that was really good to hear. I think the other thing that I appreciated was his approach to being a good listener and trying to understand, realizing that by understanding, and something we talked about a lot, by understanding, you may have a better idea of kind of what the topic really is about, what's concerning to people, and also it may change your perspective on how you come across with your points of view.
Mm-hmm.
So I both of those things I found very helpful.
Well, I would agree with your that one that, well, both of them actually, but the last one, what struck me in relationship to that was his talking about how it's a great thing to be a lawyer, but sometimes not, because
Right.
because in law you're trained to be thinking about how do you rebut the statement or the what is coming your way, and he's saying he has to turn that off. He has to turn that piece of his mind off that is always thinking of what's the rebuttal that I need to give to what I'm hearing. But it's very much like what all of us have to do. It's just a nice reminder that
Right.
we all have this inner lawyer, whether we're trained as in the law or not, that because the win is on the table, we've got that rebuttal running around in our heads, and we have to turn that off and just say, okay, it's not about winning. It's about listening. It's about building bridges. It's about finding ways to work together. That's the one thing. The second thing I that kind of stood out to me is, even though we didn't talk a whole lot about this, everything that he really described in terms of what he does was about relationship building.
It was, yeah.
And we did kind of close that loop at the end of our conversation. But I just want to highlight the fact that to our listeners, and remind ourselves that it's really about the relationships, and the degree to which we can establish some really good relationships with people is the degree to which we are able to have some more challenging conversations, because it's not about who's winning and who's losing, but it's about how do we really understand one another and think about how we move forward.
Yeah, and I think not just having challenging conversations, which is important, but also how to be able to have conversations that are meaningful and that maybe get you down the road together.
Yes.
Where there's progress in the conversation, because you're not going to have progress if it's just about stating your perspective only and not understanding. So I agree with you. I think that it was Ethan gave us a really good snippet, an idea of what's going on in the state legislature. I would have thought it'd been interesting that maybe we could have talked with him about states' rights like we did an episode or so ago. But obviously that was not the topic tonight. But sometime he has agreed to come on again in the future, so I look forward to that.
Yeah, actually, that could be a really good conversation. With him, is to kind of help us figure out the states' rights and federal rights pieces a little bit better. So, but no, it was great to have him on, and I look forward to having him back on at sometime in the near future. So, so Lamar, of course it is that time. So, how can people get in touch with you?
Sure, and we would love to hear from you. We would very much be interested to hear about your perspectives on some of the things you've been hearing lately from this podcast. But you can contact me by email at Lamar, LAMAR, third space with the numeral 3 RD at gmail.com.
And you can you can contact me at Tom, and that's TOM, third space, that's 3RD, @gmail.com. And while you're thinking about jumping on your email and sending us a note, we'd like to encourage you to also do a couple other things. One is subscribe wherever you hear this podcast or watch this podcast, whether that is YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Apple, wherever it is. We hope you'll subscribe. And the second thing we hope you'll do is that you'll share what you're hearing on this podcast. And it's real easy. There's share buttons everywhere, and you can send on out to your friends and family and others that you feel might really enjoy this podcast.
Tom, we have some things coming up too that
we do. Oh
we
yes,
do.
We do.
We have more podcasts coming.
We got you. Yes, we do.
But yeah, we have we at one point we talked a little bit about agriculture.
Yeah.
And so we are going to have a person who's an expert on agriculture and farming in the U.S. Coming shortly. And so that's something to look forward to. You know, I have learned a lot from this person, and I think that we have a lot to learn on a podcast.
Well, I have learned a lot from him through you, and I'm really looking forward to meeting him when we do this recording. Hey, have a great week.
You as well, Tom.
See you soon.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye. Tom here. Thank you for listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. Remember to click on subscribe to get notices about new episodes, and be sure to like and share the podcast as well. Opinions and ideas expressed in this podcast are solely those of Lamar Roth and Tom Klaus, and we'd like to hear your opinions and ideas too. You can leave us a voice message on Spotify, or you can email us at the addresses found in the show notes. Also, in the show notes, you can find links to some of the things we talked about today, so you can check them out yourself. Until next time, keep moving forward toward third space.
This program was produced with way too much Colombian coffee.